Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
Pledge of allegiance.
Sure will.
And pledge allegiance to the flag and the pledge of the United States of America, and the republic for which it stands, and one nation. Pledge allegiance to the flag and the pledge of the United States of America, and the republic for which it stands, and one nation. Pledge allegiance to the flag and the pledge of the United States of America, and the republic for which it stands. I have a pledge allegiance to the flag and the pledge of the United States of America. I think under Census I have a pledge allegiance to the flag and the pledge of the United States of America. I think under parking lot needs to go under there. Anything else? Okay. Communications and public comment. Ricky, do you have anybody?
No, there's no hands or anything in the chat or in the.
Okay, so you're going to turn the chat off now, right?
Yep.
Okay, if there's no one. Thank you. Review and approve the board minutes for, we have October 4 on here. When I didn't do the adjustment, but we also need to do 4/19. Is that okay if I add that? Megan, Jason, is that okay?
I'm absolutely fine with it.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Oh, it's on the new agenda. I've got the old agenda.
Yep.
Sorry, before it was added. That's my fault. Okay, it's on there. Okay, for April 19th. Can we have a motion for that, or are there, I guess we should do, are there any corrections first?
I'll move approval.
Okay, so James McAuliffe has moved to approve the minutes of April 19th. Megan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jason, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Okay, those are approved. October 4th, any corrections?
I was there.
Yes. James McAuliffe needs to be added under the others in attendance. We voted him in at that meeting, so we'll put him under others in attendance for that meeting, and then this meeting, he'll go under members in attendance. Any other corrections? Okay, can I
I'll
vote?
move approval
With corrections?
with correction.
Okay, Megan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
And James?
Yes.
Okay. We still need the ones from 3.2 and 6.7, but the business office is working on those, and we'll have those hopefully at the next meeting. Reports. Principals, who would like to go first? Laura, you're up.
All right. So we have 74 students currently. We have lost a few students to moves or transfers to another school within our SU. We reintroduced our kindness tickets that we did last year to students and staff this year again, and it's super wonderful to see students acknowledging each other, asking if they can, get up and get a kindness ticket because they've recognized something. So I'm going to keep promoting that. Makes everyone feel great. I'm super proud of the staff for embracing responsive classroom and implementing a consistent morning meeting throughout the school. We also started to read The Joyful Classroom, which is a responsive classroom text together, the professional staff. And we'll continue to read, discuss, and reflect throughout the text. And really the emphasis is on relationships and community and student engagement. We continue to face daily challenges with staffing shortages, namely a lack of substitutes. And while we make it work for the day, it is not ideal, and I'm sure you'll hear that same thing echoed from Central and the middle school too. It is challenging. Where am I here? All of our new teachers have been trained in running records and guided reading, and a big thank you to Janie for making that happen. It's a big endeavor, and we got it done, so that feels good. Brett Bishop from Focus Schools was at Sexton's River on October 7th from 7 to 9 in the morning, and just sat down with him. He had a lot of questions about our school and gave him a tour, so it was nice to get to meet him in person and for him to learn a little bit about who we are too. The dog problem. Since our last meeting, I've left a voicemail and an email for Trooper Lunderville. He's our contact at the Vermont State Police. And we have locked the gates open. So we hope that those two actions will resolve the problem. Just wait and see. We are excitedly participating in the Vermont Name a Plow. Have you seen that? So fun. And so we narrowed a student-generated list of, gosh, I don't know, maybe 50 or so names that they brainstormed to about 4. And today students voted, I'll tell you the top 4, but I can't tell you the top 1 because we'll announce that tomorrow morning. The students voted on Frosty the Snowplow, Darth Blader, Arctic Fox, and the Snowler Express.
Ooh,
so tomorrow morning, they'll learn of, whichever choice that they made today, and I'll submit that name to Vermont, and it's so cool because they get their name on a plow, and the plow operator will come to the school with a plow, so it's very cool, very exciting. Of course, we have the preliminary budget presentation later, but just some upcoming events. We have School Picture Day on the 27th, and then School Spirit Day, wear your costume, on the 29th. And our PTO will be providing a Halloween treat on that day for the students.
Laura, can you break down the numbers for the
Sure.
students in
Of course.
classes?
So kindergarten, we currently have 14. First grade, 10, second grade, 15, third grade, 15, fourth grade, 20. So as you know, we have lost students since the beginning of the year, and since my last report, lost 2.
Right. And staffing?
I will have all of
You have
that
staffing.
during the budget
You want it
report,
during the
so
budget
it'll all be there, so
Okay.
if that makes it a little easier. It's all.
Absolutely. No, that's fine. Don't have a problem with that at all.
I had a question. You mentioned that your staffing shortages. Is it, are you short a teacher or teachers, or
Yeah.
are you having absentee problems, or what's the?
Well, we are, well, not officially yet, but we will be down a librarian. We're not short, as far as not being able to hire people. It's when, staff members need to take care of family members or ill themselves or whatever, need a day for whatever reason, and trying to get a sub is super, super challenging.
So it's an absentee issue rather than you don't have
Primarily,
to be able to fill it.
yes, primarily. And then when there's more than one, it gets very tricky. But we have been making it work, as I said. It's just not ideal because you're taking from one place to cover another.
We don't have the depth of the stuff that we've had in the past, so that's what's going to.
So I know it's everywhere. I mean, it's a huge issue everywhere. So but I wanted to know whether you were still unable to fill a position,
Right.
or whether it's.
No, it's a good question. Thanks.
They had the resignation from the librarian.
Oh, right, that was mentioned last week.
I can speak to that a little bit, like my thinking for that. We obviously won't be able to offer a library class, but I still want students to be able to check out books, because that is a very exciting part of their week, and want them to continue to read, have access to materials that they enjoy. And so I will be doing that myself until I can figure out a plan B, and maybe I'll just be doing it until I can find a librarian. So we'll see what happens.
Sounds like you've got some really great ideas. Thank you, Laura. Okay, Carrie, you're up, I guess.
Okay. So many of my updates will be very similar to Laura's, and so we actually are increasing a few students. So we're at 151 students, soon to be possibly more. And we are really working down our kindergartens, just so you know, are 29 in kindergarten. First grade is 21, second grade is 33, third grade is 29, fourth grade is 38.
And that's all two classes.
2 classes of each, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. First grade still our lowest numbers right now. So we are digging into the MAPS data analysis with the teachers, but we have just preliminary scores and not going over all the details on that just yet. So like Laura said, we were responsive classroom training. So for those of you who are familiar with it, we've finished the first 6 weeks. That's a big milestone in responsive classroom. And just working really on getting deeper into learning. And so we've done a lot of review, a lot of just get to know you parts, and we've done obviously academic review, but then also just social expectations and things. That's a lot of the beginning of the year, just making sure students understand how to be now a first grader, a second grader, whatever grade they're in. So we've done a lot of work with that. We too are also starting with the Joyful Classroom, making sure that the students are, the staff are participating in that shared reading and just understanding how to support our students and making it a fun year as well as an academic year too. So we similarly have an issue with the staffing for shortage of paras right now, particularly. 1-to-1 in our WIN program, and then just a few special ed students that we're working on. Some of it has been illness, long-term outside of that. Some of it was just still not being able to hire since the beginning of the year. We've been advertising. If anybody knows somebody who's looking for a para position, we are still definitely looking. And Stacey Alexander's been on it, really trying to exhaust all options for staffing for personnel. So we are doing a fabulous job covering it, but it's not ideal because we're still robbing Peter to pay Paul for coverage and things like that too. So it's been an issue that way. So similarly, so Janie Davian did a great job with the running records, making sure the new staff are trained. That was fabulous. We also had Brett Bishop come in on the 7th, and so he did a great job working with our staff and just getting to see everybody and putting faces to names. So he's going to be working with our schools and just making sure that we have a tightened process of meeting protocols, and also just understanding everybody's role with data analysis and the work in school, and then the whole district looking at unifying all of our approaches to data analysis and what's happening and things. So as for the Rock Rebels, so that's been a great piece. We had a lot of cleanup for that. We appreciate the Department of Public Works really getting into that, and there's also a bigger plan. So there was the initial cleanup first, but then there's also a construction plan. I don't know all the details, but I know Jim DeBell has that on making sure the Jersey barriers that are coming down from the hill are moved, and then really working on making sure that the plan is in place so that it's a better system of drainage, making sure that the drains are cleared regularly, and then making sure that they can come down the water when it's a big, like the other day, it had a big storm surge. That it's cleared, and then it has a way to flow down into all the storm drains. And so that is being rectified. So we appreciate the support on that. As for the crossing guard, we are still working on that and discussing how we can do that safely. And I don't know if you have any more updates as well.
We talked with Green Mountain, and they are requesting a meeting between Belleville Falls Police Department, Green Mountain, and ourselves, just to kind of come to some agreements. I was unaware, since talking with Green Mountain, apparently Green Mountain had some safety concerns that they would like to have addressed with the Belleville Falls Police Department. So we're working on trying to get that, and of course, getting the 3 of those schedules together has been challenging, to say the least. But we are, we'll include obviously Central, but getting that together. We are shooting for this week, so we can have it on sooner than later. But it sounds like Green Mountain is, we can work something out with them. We can deal with those their safety concerns for their personnel.
We're making progress.
Yeah, but
Right.
it's I think there's some safety concerns for their personnel, and I understand that. So it's the same concerns I think we have. So.
We too are doing a name and plow. So we don't have it narrowed down quite as far yet. So some of our biggest contenders right now are Snow Crusher, Maple Machine, Orange Crush, and then Orange Sanders. So they're still discussing and voting. So we'll let you know where we're at for finalization for that. For the kitchen and HVAC system, I don't know if that's the house, if you have.
I have more that I can go into on that. So
Do you want to table that for a few
yeah, we
minutes?
can table that.
Okay. We'll get you an update on that. And then just really working on Halloween. It's going to be very low key. You're not able to do any parades. We're not really able to do anything outside of it because of COVID, and then also just safety precautions for health reasons as well. We're doing very low key in classroom celebrations with either with the PTCO or with family donations of just store-bought things that are just celebrations in the classroom. So keeping it pretty low key this year as well. And just moving along, staff is doing an amazing job keeping everything running. We were out of the building for a couple days last week, so for professional development for us, and so they were able to maintain and keep the learning going, so it was hopefully not noticed very much, so we appreciate their support on that, and nothing to add.
So the small things for coming out there, are you talking about Halloween or are you talking about Christmas stuff?
Halloween right now, just on Halloween. We're not even yeah.
I don't know what to ask you.
We're going one holiday at a time.
One
Got
holiday at a
Thanksgiving
time.
in between there. We got to figure that one out too.
I didn't know if you were planning, because sometimes it takes a lot of planning. in
Right,
advance.
we're still working on getting through this one, and then we'll see where we're at for Christmas and any other winter holiday, sure.
Okay. Thank you. Just love having you guys come in.
Sure.
Adds so much to,
Mhm.
what we know about what's going on in your schools, so. Susan, you're up.
Thank you. It's been a really busy October with our students becoming more fully engaged in classroom activities. Most recently, Mr. Kelly's 7th grade social studies class had been studying indigenous tribes throughout the United States and created some amazing projects representing their chosen tribe. Mr. Kelly will be taking many of the projects to the historical society to be placed on display. He also indicated to me, Monday, thank you. Last Friday that a local archaeologist will be coming and visiting his classroom as well. Mrs. Redding's math and science students accepted the challenge of testing their structures made out of Dixie cups, paper plates, and tape to see how much weight they could hold. I included some pictures, and the structures were very well built, and at the conclusion of the lesson, they discussed how they could build a much stronger structure by all working together. So it was really fun to watch them do that. Our professional development day was spent working on our universal guidelines of success for the school. The staff has come up with a lot of excellent ideas that will be distilled into a shorter list and be posted throughout the school. We're beginning our restorative practice work with small groups in the 8th grade this coming week, actually tomorrow. I have a description of that if you'd like me to read that. That was sent out to the parents. Would you like me to read that? Sure. So this is what we sent out to the parents. It's going to be called Terrier Voices. The notification said, we are pleased to announce a discussion group new to Bellows Falls Middle School called Terrier Voices, which will begin the week of October 19th. Beginning with our 8th grade students, they will have the opportunity to meet in small groups with members of our restorative practice staff to discuss what it means to be a middle school student. What does it look and feel like to return to large groups? How do we treat ourselves and each other with respect? We have many voices at the middle school as terriers, and we are individuals, group members, students, children, siblings, athletes, artists, musicians, leaders in our community, and new teenagers. How can we best manage our growth so that we will experience this year in the years to come? This peer group will help our students navigate these new waters together. All 8th grade students will have the opportunity to participate in Terrier Voices this year. We're excited to begin this new and exciting program at the middle school. So that'll be beginning tomorrow. Like my colleagues, Brett Bishop visited our school on October 8th. We look forward to working with him throughout the school year. Also, like my colleagues, we're struggling with substitutes, and this past week had to combine many classes when we were unable to find any substitutes at all. We are still short one science teacher. Currently, our school interventionist is filling that position, and we're also short a number of paraeducators. Today was picture day, so there was a lot of excitement in the building. We also are very excited that there will be a reenactment encampment in the green space on October 29th with volunteers from Fort 4. They will be in traditional garb, and we have permission from the fire department to have a small fire so they can see how early settlers cooked, etc. So they're pretty excited about that. Our current enrollment is as follows. Grade 5 has 45 students, grade 6 has 40, grade 7, 72, grade 8, 71, for a total of 228. That's a loss of 2 students. So that concludes my report. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Just one, this is more of a general question, is the absenteeism in the era of COVID, is the practices different, or the causes different?
Are you talking about students or adults?
The teachers, yeah. The teacher absences, obviously
I don't see, in my experience, I don't see that teacher absences now are any different than they have been historically. What I do see as the issue is that we have virtually no one who is signing up to be a substitute.
Right.
We have one substitute on our list, and that individual is only available, she was here today, but we probably won't see her again until Thursday or Friday. Mm-hmm. So it's more a case of no one wanting to do it and wanting to sign up.
And also, if I could just jump in too, because of, COVID protocols. So, oftentimes as educators and facility probably remember this too, you would go to school if you were feeling under the weather, right? And that's not allowed. So if you wake up and you have a sore throat, maybe because, your room was dry that night, you don't go to school because it's on the list of symptoms. And if within 24 hours it's gone, then you can come back. But so it's a little tighter that way as well. So I think that's
understandable, yeah.
And then I think added to that is with students. Let's say a student has a known allergy, and they just they take allergy meds, but they for some reason haven't been taking them, so they have a runny nose. That student under COVID protocol, even though they're negative, has to go home. So if you're a parent and your child, and it's another, even whether they live in district or another district, that parent now might have to stay home with that child. So I think there are some complexities to absences, but I don't think that there's teachers maybe choosing to stay out or whatever because of, I don't want to go to school because of COVID or something of that nature. Right?
I'm not seeing that at all.
Yeah. It seems to be the much more normal, I'm sick or I've got a family member who needs help or something like that.
Yeah. Because obviously coming to school sick is never a good deal. And maybe that's something good that will come out of this mess.
Well, but as you say, you can wake up with a dry throat, It may not be that you're really sick, or you woke up with a headache that may be gone, just because it was dry in the room. Also, that will be gone later, and for any teacher, it's much easier to be in school than it is to try to write lesson plans or have
I
somebody
remember those
else
days.
try to take care of that, because when you come back, you gotta get it all over again, back into the same ideas that you were trying to do before that, and if you're in and out, it makes it really tough. I agree with that totally. Okay. I was gonna ask some things under COVID, but I think, some ideas about COVID, but I think when we do our update under 7B, we can cover those there. Megan and Jason, did you have any questions?
I'm good, thank you.
I have nothing at the moment.
Hold on, other than if I had a vote, Ms. Hazard, I would totally go for Darth Blader, but that's all I had.
And we liked your ideas there. Kids are so inventive. Okay. Anybody else have anything that they wanted to add to the principals? Okay, then. WNESU has not met since our last meeting, so there's nothing new
I
there.
can give some updates if you're looking for updates there, just on some.
Okay, because we did updates from the last meeting and the last meeting.
Oh,
but-
okay, that's
but
what you're.
You can go ahead if you'd like to.
I just didn't know where you wanted me to kind of chime in on a few things.
If you want to get them there, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
So a few things. I got an email recently from Kat Goodall, our school nurse here at the middle school. And she's been working hard to track down the vaccination rate of students in the school and those who are eligible right now for vaccination. As of right now, there's 146 eligible students. Only 51 are fully vaccinated. 60 have received at least one dose. So that puts us at about 35% of our eligible student population being fully vaccinated, or about 41% of our eligible population having at least one dose. We're quite a ways off of the target of 80%, but just wanted to update you guys on that.
And how many are eligible?
146.
146.
146.
That's a moving target, though, at the middle
Right,
school,
yeah.
because you can have somebody become eligible any day because they can
Right.
turn 12. So, and hopefully pretty soon we will have the 5 to 11s eligible, so.
Well, then, that's going to shrink that percentage right back down.
It
So
is.
the minute that, the minute this building can include those,
But it should make them safer.
yeah, we always encourage, vaccination if that's what works for families. The other things that we're going to update, most of the principals have already updated about the different things with which is great. I think with the HVAC system, one of the things I've asked Jim DeVell to do is to look into the possibility of retaining an engineer to come in and look at all of our buildings to get, because we can all say the HVAC systems need upgrading, but what does that actually mean? And so we need someone to come in who's got the expertise to really look at the systems and to give us some hard recommendations before we can start. I don't want to just be guessing it's going to cost $1 million or it's going to cost $2 million to upgrade the system. A lot of the principals, when we get into the budget piece, we'll talk about mini splits and things like that, but is that the right way to go? Or should we be doing mini splits? Should we be doing a full run on the HVAC system? So, this building desperately needs a heating ventilation system, an air conditioning system, where, it gets pretty stifling up on the 4th floor in the hot days. And I know Central runs the same thing. One of the things Carrie and I were talking about today, and we'll talk about later, some of her windows don't even open. So, you know, in a COVID world, you want to be able to open a window or have an enclosed system. Well, we don't have the ability to open a window, we don't have an enclosed system, so we need to kind of look at that. And, you know, same thing with Laura's building, is just looking at what upgrades need to be done, so.
I'm just surprised that we haven't already had an engineer looking at these things.
I'm
obviously,
not going to dispute that
Yeah.
statement.
No, it should have been. You know,
And some of it may be done, there might be pieces done. I haven't, Jim was going to talk with Rick, you know, Jimmy, like, there are pieces done. And I think that was one of the big pushes to bring in a director of operations, to bring it all together under one umbrella, because right now it kind of lives in all the different areas. And I can't give you an overview from a superintendent perspective of what is needed. So,
And I know when we visited Central, and Jason was on the board at that time, and he was looking at the boiler, and he was saying that that really is well overdue.
yeah, and so some of the things are looking at, do we go in with an ESSER lens and just look at ESSER lens focused stuff, because it has to be around COVID and recovery and stuff of that nature, or do we look at a facilities needs base and look at what does it need to bring everything up to, you know, be in compliance and also not die? I mean, if the boiler were to go tomorrow, there's no funds set aside to deal with that. And if we know we've got maybe 3 more years on a boiler, we can then have an idea of how to recommend securing funds. So
I would think you'd need a comprehensive look,
yeah,
as opposed to.
I do too. I just saying that that's kind of like, I don't want people to think we're just coming in with that narrow focus. I think we need to see the bigger picture, and then start parsing out, oh, this does fit under ESSER, so we can purchase under that and move things around on the board kind of thing. So.
Oh, the other thing that there is some resident knowledge, and you mentioned Rick. It's not that many years ago that this building was redone, and one of the hugest part of the expenditure was HVAC and windows. And so to hear that a window doesn't open.
That's at Central, not here. That's at Central, not here, yeah. So.
That was 2005, 2006.
Sadly, that's the new addition is the part where the windows are.
Yeah, so.
In the new addition.
But, you know, I think the idea of having institutional knowledge of things that aren't working, that should be working, that should also be part of this analysis.
100%. And when I have worked and done this work in other districts, that when you bring in a group to do that, they talk with that institutional knowledge, and they piece it all together. So it's not just what they're looking at; it's also where's the history behind where we got to where we are.
Yeah. Where you have it, yeah, definitely use it.
Ricky, could you pull up that slide that's entitled Rockingham? Nope, not that one. See that? Yeah, I changed it. Oh, you got it. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Yeah, so you can present that. Getting there. It's like me the other day. I couldn't figure it out. Okay, so one of the things in talking with Harley, and I mean, if folks don't know, the group, the nutrition staff, they have been working nonstop since March 13th of, what is that now, 2020. Yeah, and one of the things these folks didn't do, like some surrounding districts might have done, is they didn't actually decrease capacity. They increased capacity 3 times. And so they have been nonstop moving forward, and they actually are making money and paying for themselves. I mean, so what they've done is incredible. But one of the, as we upgraded things in the past, and there were some upgrades done here at the middle school, there were a lot of upgrades at the high school. Central was an area that was not really looked at. And so I asked Harley to kind of put together just some key points here of things that need, reasons we really need to kind of go in and address the kitchen at Central. First of all, Central has our highest free and reduced meal eligibility population. So 70% of the entire SU comes out of Central.
If I could just add on, so we also have universal breakfast and lunch program too. So every student in our school, regardless of eligibility, because we have such a high percentage, is eligible for free breakfast and lunch.
Yeah,
too,
thank you.
so.
And actually, we do that across the
Right.
SU. Everyone
We
gets
applied for it beyond COVID, so
Yeah.
we are eligible for that. So regardless of COVID.
Yeah. The highest meal program participation in the SU comes out of Central. One of the things when I was talking with Harley even today, he mentioned the work, just overall kind of backing up a little bit, but the amount of volume and work that they're doing, to put it in perspective, is more than Burlington, more than Wyndham Southeast, in the Brattleboro area. So we are a much smaller SU, and we are churning out more meals, and we are feeding more kids on a daily basis than these larger districts and SUs. But anyway, so Central is the only one without a walk-in refrigerator space, the only kitchen without a dry storage space. They're undersized to serve the population, which would mean Carrie would lose her office. Like, oh, you moved your office. Yeah. So, we'd have to look at space and how we utilize space there, and that's a big thing. If we've got to knock a hole in a wall, that's obviously a big deal. The cooking equipment is the most outdated, and a lot of meals need to be produced off-site and delivered, and then you just don't have the space and capacity. Overall, when we're talking about costs, I couldn't put it up there, but the cost, he's estimating the cost around $183,000 for these upgrades. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that's probably low. And all the conversations I've had with folks is you could probably triple, if not quadruple, that figure because of supply chain and material costs.
Here's the silver lining. Much of it can be reimbursed for some things, so there are some grants available for some components.
If we were to use ESSER funds, which a lot of this could fall under ESSER funds, when we look at these things, we wouldn't be able to get reimbursed for those, obviously, but anything else, we could look at that. So, any questions on food or nutrition? All right, next slide, please. So just an update on ESSERs, and because we talk in acronyms all the time. So ESSER, and I should know it right off the top of my head, but it's the Elementary Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Fund. I believe that is what it is. But this is basically the stimulus money that was from the federal government, and it's in 3 packages: ESSER 1, 2, and we refer to it as ESSER 3, but it's really known as ARP ESSER, which is ARP, which is American Recovery Plan or Program. So in the first allocation that we got, which is ESSER 1, we were allocated $1.3 million and change. And that was allocated to us back almost right away when it was first came out. Pardon me, the total award was $1.483 million, and $1.339 was allocated, which means it was given a budget and trying to spend that money down. So far to date, $862,000 has been spent off of that grant. And you can see the breakdown in FY21, we spent about $782,000, and in FY22, we spent just under $80,000, which leaves about $337,000 that has not been spent. Some of that $337,000 has been allocated already to line items, but we now can kind of look at it and say, okay, we know we're not going to be spending any more on that line item, so we can reallocate those funds. Shauna is in the business office is we're going to be sitting down this week and going through. We have to adjust some lines because on some lines we actually spent over. And so we have to go in and adjust those numbers around and everything so it matches up. But then we'll have that monies available to start looking at some things to look at. Some of what's listed below are just some of the things that have already, things that the monies were spent on. Part of that 862,000. With the remaining dollars, what we're looking at in that ESTHER committee that I have is looking at some things. A lot of talk is about what additional PPEs we may need, and to start, we can't stockpile, but what can we get this year? Because this is dollars that will end at this year. These dollars are done September 23. We're 22, right? No, we're 22. These are done at 22, sorry, okay, I have to get my years right. So we need to look at how technically these dollars have to be spent this year on this year. So, so we have to kind of go around and look at those things. Next slide, please.
June 30th, right?
June 30th is basically the cutoff to keep spending, and the grant goes away on September 30th. So in SR2, our total allocation was $5,828,077. And so we've been originally, prior to Dr. Carey and Mr. Pratt leaving, there was about 1.5 million that had been allocated. We formed a committee and started talking about how to shore up, and because this fund had to be applied for by November 1st. And so what we did was we looked at the things we had done, like summer programming and interventionists that work in each of the buildings, and we projected those out for the life of the grant. And the whole purpose was to secure the funds, because we know afterwards we can go back and reallocate the funds as we feel it's necessary to do. So we've been able to allocate everything but $377. And that was not easy. But the group worked a lot. We talked a lot about what I have down there at the bottom, summer programming, after school programming, and that's at Central and Saxon's River mainly, because the after school programming at the middle school is covered under the 21C grant. Interventionists for the next 3 years, professional development, we've talked about that before, but that's going to be probably some of our biggest need, is helping our teachers become better at their craft in this kind of world that we live in. Also looking at outdoor and nature-based professional development, curriculum, and supplies. One of the big tags in COVID is how are you getting kids outside and using the outside, because you can social distance a lot easier outside. So we want to really beef that area up. Also technology, infrastructure, hardware, software, salary, benefits. We're coming to a point where I think Ricky can admit we're pushing the boundaries of what we have, and probably are needing to look at it, because if we're going to need to continue to offer remote learning in some fashion, we really need to beef up our systems. And then one of the big lifts that's in there is the circuit breaker at the high school. That circuit breaker controls the generator. The circuit breaker was originally installed next to the boiler, and so what's happened over years between the heat and the water vapor is the circuit breaker has become brittle, the line has become brittle, and so when the generator needs to come on in an emergency situation, it actually trips the breaker, and so then the generator doesn't come on. And so there's obviously, and that happens like on a regular basis as a test, and then that we're able to, when the generator comes on, we're able to push energy back out to the grid, and so we actually there's a savings cost that happens when that happens. When the circuit breaker doesn't work, we don't, and so we're losing those dollars. So there's a need to do this. But we're going to have to relocate the circuit breaker, which of course now becomes a construction project, which then creates a whole layer of complexity within the ESTHER grants. So. And then the last slide.
Is there anything, it doesn't sound like there's any like kitchen or HVAC numbers in SR2.
Correct. So we were looking at using SR3 funds for that, and the reason is because of how the ESTHER grants kind of came out. ESTHER1 was about recovering, like, and dealing with sanitation and things like that. Some of those pieces. ESTHER2 was more about reopening and being able to reopen. And then ESTHER3 is known as the infrastructure grant, and so it was really a lot of money to do some of these really big projects. And ESTHER2 had to do a lot with loss of learning as opposed to getting your building up. There's also still an air quality grant that's supposedly coming that might help with the whole HVAC system, but we keep teasing about it, so we haven't heard fully on that.
And I'm assuming you're going to find a place for that other $377,000.
From ESTHER1? Yes, that's
from ESTHER2. I mean,
the $337.
That's just
$337.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was
$1,000. Now we're gonna have a cookout.
that's a rounding error.
And what happens there is it's what they want. What the government wants to see is that you have a meaningful reason to spend these dollars, and so. We'll be able to even cover those $337. I mean, it's just, they just don't want you to take a grant and then just have it sit there and never really allocate any money because they want to redistribute it to another district. Sure. If you're not going to use it. So that's the, we were awarded these dollars and we want to serve our kids. So that's the function. So under our ESTHER, we were allocated $13,079,351. So the ARP ESTHER is a little more complicated because one of the things you have to do is, you have to come up with a whole plan for how you're going to spend the dollars. You have to do meaningful community engagement. It has to tie back to 3 large buckets, which has to do with academics, social emotional learning, and student engagement. And so we've been doing a lot of work with Brett Bishop, who you've heard about with Focus Schools, on coming up with visions and goals. So a lot of that is going to lead to our focus and helping us focus on how to spend the dollars. We've done a survey of families out of the work with Focus. That committee was kind of looking more at academics. When we looked at and kind of parlayed our community, their focus was more on social emotional learning. So it's not to say that one's better than the other. It's just there's a need in both areas. And so how do we make sure we meet those needs? Part of the $13 million, we have to set aside at least 20% for loss of learning. So that has to be targeted for loss of learning. And then, as I said, we'll continue to work with Focus Schools on aligning our goals to meet the needs of the ESTHER funding. And so we've been working on building, one of the things we have to do is build a web page that pushes out a lot of this information. And so we've got quite a bit up there, but we're adding to it every day, just to keep the public informed and look at how we're doing. So the ESTHER committee that we have together will start reviewing and discussing potential projects and use of funds so that we're not just running around wasting our time. Because one of the things you have to do under our ESTHER is you have to get initial consent from the state when you want to do something. So if you want to buy a van, you can't just say, let's go out and buy a van. And maybe in the past you could have. Now what you have to do is you have to actually let the government know ahead of time, we're thinking about buying a van. We looked at a lease versus a purchase, and so we did that initial work. So can we have permission to go out and buy the van? And so that's actually one of the things we've kind of talked about is, you know, with COVID, but also, you know, social distancing, is purchasing not just one, but a few vans that we can use to transport students, that we can use to, you know, to job placements. Right now we use a lot of buses to move kids around, which there's a huge cost in moving, you know, having a bus to move a kid around. In a vehicle, the costs are a lot cheaper, especially if we have a student who maybe needs to quarantine and get home, but a parent can't come pick up that child. If we had a vehicle, we could actually take that child home, and now we don't have an issue of a child in a building having to quarantine and having to deal with all that. So that's some of the ways we're looking at those funds. The other part under the ARP ESSER is any construction projects need to have initial consent. And then there's various layers of consent along the time as the project works. So for like that circuit breaker piece, we have to upload what we anticipate the cost is going to be and everything to get their you know, blessing, and then we can go ahead, and then that'll make us move to the next one, where then we will upload and let them know how the project's going along, and so there's a lot more oversight with ARP than there have been with other grants. So that's the complexity of layers. So that was. The only other thing that we're still working on, and I don't know why, other than the information is difficult to obtain, is looking at teacher census going back a few years. We don't seem to have where I think we should be able to. I should be able to go. It's right there on our website. It's not, and so we're having to go back and dig through some different records. You know, we've had an administrative assistant change, and so Sue Stack left and Nicole came on. It's just blending all that together to get that information. So that's the only thing that's not in this packet is our teacher census piece.
They had that in through having to know levels, how many years, and those kinds of things. So we've had that in the past.
I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It's like if you ask me to put my hand on something that Mr. Pratt or Dr. Carey had, it's difficult to just go grab it. And absolutely. So that's what we've had to do. And then when we moved SUs, you know, from Cherry Hill over, like it's now trying to locate where that information is. So.
You lose some things and you know exactly where they are, but other things got stored.
I could not find extension cords at my house this weekend, despite the fact that I know I put them in a box and I labeled it extension cords, and I cannot find that box. So.
Yes, those things happen to all of us, I think. Okay, but we will know the current, and that's probably what we need right at this moment anyway, and then we can do a comparison at that point. Okay.
We're good there. Thank you very much.
Which you'll cover those when we get to the game budget anyway. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Did you have any more questions?
Good.
Anybody out there, Megan, Jason, you have any questions?
Nope, none from me.
Nothing here. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Okay, so committees, the WNE issue policy committee has not met. One of the board ones has, but not the general committee. You just covered the recovery team and your ESSER funds. Negotiations will cover in executive session, and I think that's it for the reports.
Okay, so unfinished business, we are up to budget discussion.
Wrote that other one,
First
Ricky.
draft. Would anybody mind if I flip those? The other thing is the update on the state guidelines is under unfinished business. Megan and Jason, are you okay if I flip those?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, that's fine.
You okay? Okay, so the update on the state guidelines, we're still at the same levels I think we were at, and I don't think there's any changes till November 1st. Is there any progress, Mr. Haas, on the antibody testing?
No. One of the things we realized this last week, maybe I realized it, because I've been a huge proponent of the test to stay, which is the antigen testing, because it'll keep kids in school, is when we met with the school nurses on Tuesday, with the principals and the school nurses, on Wednesday morning of last week, we would have had to have been testing 150 kids. And each test takes 15 minutes from start to finish. And so the logistics of trying to, number one, and we're talking 3 buildings with about 50 kids at each building. So, so let's just take this building right here. Number one, we just have an issue of there's no parking lot. Right, so we don't have, so how do we deal with that? And are we going to have all these people standing outside and waiting while their tests are being, so just those logistics of that, and then having enough people who are going to swab noses and register the tests. So these are some of the pieces we have to, deal with it. And then the way the test is designed is parents have to bring their kids in and wait. So we're not talking 50 people, 50 kiddos, we're talking 100 people that have to deal with that. And so then when you put that out to the whole SU, we're trying to replicate that in 3 other sites. It is a huge lift. So one of the things we are looking at doing is hiring, and we have it out there for health office assistants. These are folks who would be comparable to a para on the para scale, but would work with the health office. We're looking at trying to hire 5 of them, 1 for the high school, 1 for the middle school, 1 for Central, 1 for Westminster, and then 1 that would be a float that would, when Saxon's River had need, or Grafton, or if another building we had to bring that person over, we could do that. What that would allow us to do is, because with the test to stay protocol, you do not need to be a nurse or a medical person to do the swabs, which means the nurses can stay at the schools and deal with this distribution of medication and deal with those issues that we have on an everyday, and we can use other resources to do some of that testing. We don't feel we're at a comfortable place to say, let's put together a volunteer kind of core of folks to, Minutemen, to call them up and say, everyone show up here, parents or community members. But the other piece I want to do is this week we'll be reaching out to local health organizations and EMT organizations to come together, because they know how to do this. We know how to educate kids. We don't know how to, do what the National Guard and what the medical profession did with all the testing. So we want to bring them in, see what kind of support they can give us. Maybe it's just guidance, but also maybe the physical support they can provide for us. But the other piece that we learned last week from Secretary French is there is a potential supply chain problem with the tests. Because as other states are saying, oh, this sounds like a really great idea, and they're jumping on board, then what looked like we were the only, state doing it is now going to take a depletion. So what looked really, really promising, and I think is a great conceptual plan, it's just going to be logistically really, really tough. And we want to do it right. If we're going to do it, we want to do it right. I don't want to do something where we're picking and choosing, oh, well, today, Saxon's River, we're gonna let your kids test to come to school, but Bellows Falls Middle School, your kids have to stay quarantined. That's not equitable. So.
And this is just the children that are unvaccinated.
No, so there's 4 parts to the plan. One of them is the surveillance testing that we already do.
Right.
The other one is the antigen testing, but it can be used for vaccinated and unvaccinated folks. So,
Okay, but if they're vaccinated, they're not considered close
but
contacts.
you can use it if they have symptoms.
If they have symptoms.
So,
Okay.
so let's say, Laura's vaccinated, she's got the sniffles, kind of like the allergies that I talked about. We test her, right? She's got to go home because she's got symptoms. But we test her, she's negative. She comes back tomorrow, we test her again, she's still negative. So if she has symptoms, she goes back home. And this is, I think, the other complexity that everyone thinks like, oh, that means my kid can come to school or the teacher can come to school. If you have symptoms, you have something, you need to go home. That is the protocol. So the 3rd day, we swab her, she's negative, no symptoms, come on into school. Next day, day 4, we still have to swab her, no symptoms, come on into school.
So for parents, it would be better if the child's got a runny nose and stuff, it'd be better not to bring them if they know it's an allergy and that kind of thing, because they're going to send them home anyway, because they've got a runny nose and that. And so if we could get it geared and focused on those students that have the chance of being able to stay in school, those that are unvaccinated and
I would have to check with our medical professionals, because my understanding is it's 7 days in a row of testing, and if there's an interruption, that could cause, like a false negative or something like that in the testing. So it may even be, yes, the kid has a runny nose, so he's going to go home, we'll bring him in, so he's testing, so it's negative, so you've got that 7 days in a row of negativity.
but see, if you know that that's what it is, then you wouldn't necessarily,
I'm just going off of
I'm just going off of
having
if
attended.
they're sick.
I'm just going off of having attended the trainings that the state has put out in the guidelines that they're telling us. But I would have to check with our nurses before I could sit here and say, yeah, we don't want those kids to come in and get tested. Maybe what we do is set up a separate time for them to come in, type of thing. But my understanding is you want to have that consistency of testing.
Yeah, not in the middle of the students that are going to get to stay. Because if you can get those done so they can stay rather than, because it's going to take an amount of time no matter what in the mornings.
Correct.
Before they can get into the classroom. So if we could cut down on those numbers, we probably have a chance of getting more children in the classroom that are not going to test positive.
I understand your thinking. I think realistically, like of the 50 kids, you're talking 1 or 2. As opposed to, 48 kids are the ones that have to show up. It's not 48 kids that have sniffles, and so it's still going to be a large thing. But again, I think it's getting the logistics, getting it all done correctly, and not rushing into something and having it fall apart on us, because that will not go well.
Makes sense to me.
It would seem to me that the kind of the principle behind this testing program is the ability to hire para-type people. And we've heard our principals here say that they can't hire para. So it would seem to me that if that's the underlying principle or assumption, then I don't know how you could ever have the program. Unless the National Guard was commissioned by the governor to spend a couple of months with our schools. I just think that I think the most important thing is to pursue policies and practices that we can do, that are feasible, and in the meantime do the best we can with what we've got. And I think that So that, I mean, that's one thing. I would assume that this kind of testing would be covered under ESSER.
So the tests themselves is provided by the state. So we are not having to pay. To bring in personnel would be under ESSER funds.
Yeah.
And the health assistance that I spoke of,
Yeah.
what we talked about is the goal there is to eliminate their own jobs. Right? So we know that this is not something we want to sustain. And so the idea is if as more and more folks get vaccinated, right? And we move further beyond, and hopefully we don't have, some other Delta 55 variant, right? So, wishful thinking that COVID is going to be in our rearview mirror, and as that number reduces, then we're going to keep looking at needs, and we're not going to maintain health assistance that we just don't need. So
it seems to me, just from this meeting, that our focus ought to be pushing to have that 51 kids that are fully inoculated out of 146 up to 80%. And I think that's where I'd be putting my limited resources on, having a inoculation day or whatever. We'll do the middle school next Monday, and we'll do the central school the following Monday, and Saxon's River School the following Monday. Just kind of mobilize to get the children inoculated.
I hear exactly what you're
Saxon's River
saying.
and Central are not eligible at this point.
Oh, no, I realize that, but I'm saying we're close to
and that's a good
close
place,
to the
but
5
this
to
keeps
11
those
and-
kids that are not
this
eligible at
is
this point
this is not a good
able
number.
to stay in school as well. And it's a different position than your para position, which is all day working with students in the classroom. This would be a totally different type of para position.
Right, but I'll tell you, it's everybody's having difficulty hiring, particularly if they need to have a certain skill or they're willing to do a certain type of task. And I would say this would be a difficult.
We've actually had some positive applicants already, because there are people who don't want to work necessarily in a classroom as a paraprofessional, but they would rather work in a health office because they want to go into the medical profession. So I understand your concerns. I think we put the information out there about vaccination. We keep pushing it and suggesting it. Conversations I've had with parents, there are some parents who are still, they feel that the science is not 100% behind the younger people being vaccinated. So that's some of their hesitancy to get vaccinated. They just don't know what the long-term effects of the vaccine are going to be on them. I'm not judging based on that. That's the facts of what some of the parents have told me. There are obviously parents who don't believe in vaccinations. There are parents whose kids can't be vaccinated. So there's all those complexities that are going on. Springfield did try to do an inoculation day, and I think they tried to do a testing day, and they actually got in trouble from the state. It's not as easy as one would want it to be, or think that it would be as easy that I could go up to Springfield, talk to the local group in Springfield and say, hey, we want to do this, and have them say, yes, they want to do it, but then have the state say, you didn't ask us first, and go through our lawyers and all that stuff. So
We were actually supposed to have one here today, and the state canceled it, and they said it was not an appropriate use of their resources to come here and provide a vaccine for our ministry. So they canceled it.
So it's we're dealing with Mount Pillier a little bit here. So I mean that's the complexity.
Yeah, it's complex. It's hard to
Could just
explain.
try and maybe drive down as get down the road here. Maybe when 5 to 11s are approved, and there's a whole new group, they will be willing to do another one in our area, like they were doing the clinics at the schools last year.
And they're talking about it. I mean, the conversation that we had with Dan French on Thursday is that's what they're talking about doing, but like, again, just the rollout and the logistics, they're not gonna do it at every single building, right? And so then just trying to figure out, is the school appropriate? And then, if junior is the one who can be vaccinated and comes to Central and he's the one, but then the whole family shows up, like, are we able to vaccinate all of them, or is it just junior? I mean,
Hopefully all of them.
and so they're trying to figure all that out, and they don't want us to move, and that's, some of us are ready to move faster than the state, and it's frustrating.
Well, I just encourage you to, whatever we can do to encourage vaccinations would be great.
Yeah, one of the things it just occurred to me, so if I can backtrack a little bit real quick, I know I don't want to delay us too much, but I think it's important, just in working with the staff on vaccination rates. Let me just grab that real quick here, because I think it's just so you know kind of where folks are in your buildings. So currently, the Bellows Falls Middle School, we have 93.62% of our staff is vaccinated. At Central, 97.37%. That comes down to one person.
Yeah.
So, and then at Saxon's River, it's 92%. We're just an even number. And then because many of the folks who work in those separated out WNESU employees, so that includes special education, interventionists, bus drivers, and people at central office and everything. So it's a collective group, but that's at 67.44%.
That's a lot lower.
But it's a much more diverse group.
Right.
I could go through and tease it out. I believe folks who work in buildings and have more direct contact with kids, there's a higher vaccination rate. But
I think they're concerned for their children, for the children that they're working with too. There's that level too that they're looking at.
Yeah.
So that's.
But it was real positive. We were kind of, when we were moving up to the 8th, it was a little sluggish. That was the date of the mandate. It was a little sluggish, but we kind of did a little encouraging, and folks really kind of came through. We're dealing with some folks who, they're uncomfortable providing us a copy of a picture of their card. And so we've worked out the bugs on how can you still prove you're vaccinated and stuff like that, and working those things and finding out, like, there might have been for some reason, as I said, some WNESU employees, they were tagged to different buildings. So that was, when I talked to the nurses, they're like, well, I talked to my staff. I know how many are not vaccinated, but because other people were somehow tagged to that building, it was lowering their number, their percentage number. So we cleaned it up, real positive. So I just wanted to report that back, because that is a big push. So.
Makes us very proud of our staff, I would think.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Oh, I have one other thing on the state guidelines before you do. I was going to ask our principals, because they have to keep their masks on. I was going to ask you how it's going as far as providing breaks, and I'm assuming that as the state guidelines don't require it outside, that there's no requirement for them to wear masks outside and that kind of thing. How is that working at each of your schools?
Our classes take mask breaks and go over to the green space. So they allow students that opportunity.
Are they able to interact some when they're outside and doing that?
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Okay.
How about you?
So we have the typical breakfast, lunch, snack breaks and things too. There have been some cases where it's been very tight, like on a playground, where if they're closer than 3 feet apart, we've had to have some students wear their masks because they choose to play on a structure that you can't play safely on if they're not masked, because they are closer than 3 feet apart. So on the playground, there's like a wheel rotation piece and things, and so in order for them to be able to play that closely, they are wearing masks outside, so.
Not outside, anytime they're outside, I mean, it didn't have to be.
Well, we're getting mixed reports from the nurses as well, because they're getting a lot of COVID cases that are coming from outdoor activities. And so we're getting some little pushback on that from the nurses too, and appropriately, because we're trying to figure out where exactly are the contacts coming from. Thankfully, the cases are not coming from school, but the contacts themselves are coming from potentially outdoor activities. So the guidance may or may not be protecting those places. So it may be that they're also meeting indoors, but they're also coming from outdoor activities too. Football, other places.
So if they're requiring to do them then, are you figuring out some way where they can at least?
They have other
have
options,
it out
either, yes,
outside
yes,
where
yes.
they can, because.
I think what it is if kids are choosing to play on
Right.
certain apparatus
Right.
that is putting them within close contact for a lengthy period of time, then they're gonna have to choose to put their mask on, but when they step off that apparatus, they can pull
They
the
can
mask
pull it
off.
down, they can go to other structures, they can do other things, so
So
there's
it's
only
not-
a few that
They're
are.
not forced to
Right.
interact closer than 3 feet.
The kids actually said that they like it, especially now it's getting colder, they actually like it because it keeps them warmer outside, so.
Similar to Ari, so any meal times and then anytime a child asks for a mask break, they're granted one. Teachers bring classes out, like for read aloud when it's nice weather.
That's delightful.
Yeah, and then recess, very similar. I mean, we are keeping our students in pods still at recess, and they rotate to different parts of our playground. But on the structure, we have a protocol in place, so they get a warning. You know, warning is a harsh word, but a friendly reminder, let's say, about distance. And then if they're not able to maintain, then they wear masks. But it's a choice to be there. Because they're so, but I would say that 99.9% of the time, kids don't have their masks on at recess time. Yeah. Unless they choose to, some kids
Right.
choose to.
We can't deny them the,
Absolutely.
ability to wear it if they want to wear it, so,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
so.
there are
kids.
students that choose to keep it on.
My son let her have it on.
Right.
Even when he's playing baseball.
Mhm.
Yeah, you
Right.
take it off, nope.
Yep, I mean, most of the kids are fine, they really adjust to it, they're used to it. I mean, some of our kids, this is all they've known for school for 3 years now, so it's strange, but that's the case, so it's. they
I
know.
recall back when we started talking about coming back to school and parents, concerned, oh, my kid can't wear a mask, my kid won't wear a mask, I try to get them to wear it outside, but, peer pressure, but also just, conforming to norms and whatnot. It is amazing to see the resilience of our students and how they do comply with it. And even at the high school, when they let it slide down and they take a reminder, to pull it up, and they're not. The number of kids who are fighting it is minimal at best.
Yeah, I just
It's unfortunate
wonder
to do
where
trends
we're
like
at.
that.
Eventually, maybe. We'll get past
Well, we're
this.
coming into flu season.
I know,
so,
right?
Yeah,
let's keep our masks on.
that's true.
So.
Okay.
All right.
So
So,
that kind of, I think, covered our, I think you provided a lot of good information, all of you, thank you so much.
all right.
Okay, so budget discussion, you're up, Mr. Hunt.
All right, Ricky, let's just jump right in. So if you can click on that link. So this, and I will, I'll put this, you need access. So.
I get that every time I try to go in there.
How do I do that, Ricky, so you get access?
You hit that button and go and
There you go. So I'll put this into the folder on the budget, so you guys have this a little better. But right there, you see at the top, what you have is the numbers that the principals reported in the column FY22. That's the current column. FY23 is the projected for enrollment. So you can see that Central is projecting a lower enrollment. So is Saxon's River, and if you slide over, Ricky, so we can kind of go across, that's the middle school, and then all the way over is actually preschool, way over. So just to kind of orient us with where it is, but all three schools are showing a slight reduction in student enrollment. The pre-K numbers are always an enigma. Of knowing where all those kids are, but currently there's like 57 kids that we know of in private groups, and then we've got about 30 kids or a little bit more. That number, again, fluctuates. Some of these numbers, when we grabbed them, might even be different than the numbers they reported today by one or two of these type of thing. But if we start here, just because we're on it with the middle school, our staffing, what we currently have is there's, for the 5th and 6th grade, there are 3 teachers, and those are kind of broken down with ELA, social studies, and then there's a combination of math science or social studies math, depending on the teacher's certification. And then in 7th and 8th grade, there's 4. And then I should have frozen that pane so that you could see where the 2, 1, 1, 1 kind of go, but those are our specialists for the most part. And looking at that,
I'm gonna
Yep.
interrupt.
Yep.
I'm not clear on what you just told me as far as.
You know, you didn't give us
teachers.
this isn't in our package.
No, I said that this is not in your packet. This was put together.
Therefore, in each 7th and or in
What would be
so they're
helpful, I
paid
think,
for their.
is to get us a copy of this so that we can
Okay.
review it.
Yeah, that's what I say.
It's
That-
really hard to.
He's going to.
I said that I put this in the folder, in the electronic folder, but we can get you out a printout copy also. Yeah, so kind of slide it over there. Thank you, Ricky, for freezing that. What you'll see there is we've broken it down by how many admin are in the building, how many music teachers, art, PE, school counselors, librarian, custodial staff, shared maintenance, and then student services. And that reflects what you heard earlier, which is the open positions. Right now at the middle school, there's actually there's 2 open positions for student services with case managers. And then there's an open interventionist position, there's an open title position, and then we have quite a few open para positions.
On
at this
science,
building.
right?
And then up high, there is a science position, but what happened, and the reason it doesn't reflect it on here, is the interventionist is actually covering the science. So the current interventionist, and that's why that's showing as open, is covering the science position as opposed to the science position opening and showing the intervention.
Okay, so the interventionist is labeled as the open position, is what
Correct,
you're telling us.
correct.
Okay.
Because
And
that,
how
because
many
that,
paras did you say, is that 7?
there's 13 paras that are needed for this building, and there's 5 openings.
So you're functioning with 8.
Functioning would be an interesting word. I
We
will
have
say that,
8 in the building.
yeah, Michael Harrington has been working with Sue and Dana and Stacy Alexander
We're covering.
to find coverage. We are borrowing and begging and doing whatever we can to make sure that kids are getting the services they need to have. One of the reasons why you see the 2 student service openings is we have one faculty member at the beginning of the school year that we moved over to Westminster because they had there was a need there also. And so we shifted that person over for the year. And then we have another individual who has submitted their resignation. That needs to go before the SU, the case manager who is resigned. So we know that that position is open. It's not open right this second, but we know it's going to be open. So that projection of just with the middle school was at 13 students less. You know, I think some of the complexities are, you see that the incoming 5th grade is going to be larger than the current 5th grade. But, you know,
I wish I could see it.
so can you make that a little bigger, Ricky?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what you see here is there's 58 students projected to come in the 5th grade, right there. And so there's 71 current 8th graders, and so those 71 will be moving on, but there's less kids coming in as opposed to, so it'll be looking at all of those, but one of the complexities when you
Okay,
get.
because the
Yeah.
6th grade to the 7th grade is lower. Is.
6th grade to 7th grade is lower?
The ones that moved up from 6th grade to 7th grade, you moved just 40 up, but aren't there other students that will come in to 7th grade?
But potentially, but we don't have those numbers right this second. So I didn't have those numbers to project out.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, because Westminster.
Yeah, it's possible, yes, but
7,
I didn't have those.
Grafton comes in at 7.
So those numbers could grow quite a bit, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So
it might be good to maybe look at that if we're trying to figure out staffing needs for next year, you know,
Yeah,
as far as
I can make
budget
yeah.
and that kind of thing.
So. And then if we kind of toggle over to Saxon's River, let's just go backwards here.
Want to zoom now or later?
Sorry?
You want me to zoom in
You
now?
can zoom in now. I can kind of follow one way through it. So in Saxon's River, again, that kindergarten class could bloom given the number of kids that we're seeing in preschool, but it's hard to predict at this point. And so I went with a more conservative number of 15 coming in, but they are losing a few kids. That might be a typo on 4th grade there. It is a typo. In FY23, Ricky? Yeah, that should be 15. So that'll adjust those numbers up a little bit. You know, so they are projecting down about 5 students. At this time, but their teacher enrollment, you can look, they have 1 per grade. They do have a few paras, regular ed paras, and those are to support students who have a 504 and have learning needs in that sense. And then they share a lot of their music and art and PE that's shared. And then right now the librarian is showing it as open because we know that that person is resigning. Look at that. So student services, there's only 1 case manager out there. They do have quite a large caseload. So that may shift a little bit, but that'll be something we kind of project out. I don't know if there's any questions about that. I can try and.
Just to clarify, music and art is shared with Central and PE is shared with another school outside of our SU.
Thank you.
So there has been some initial discussion about do we look to consolidate some of these shared specialist positions or all specialist positions at the SU level, but I think that's something
The central level?
Yeah. So with Central, again, they've got a very large fourth grade class right now. And so that class will, be moving up to the middle school. But they have 2 teachers at each level, and you can see with those, even with those numbers, what we're talking, I mean, to take even a class of 21 at second grade, I think we need to have a discussion on, what's the best way and target those students, whether it's 1 or 2 teachers right now, but we're still anticipating having 2 teachers at that level.
Is there a consideration of taking and switching some of those with like Saxon's River? Because if you combine your second grade next year of 10 at Saxon's River and 21 at Central, that's 31 students. That's only 15 and 16.
So I probably should have prefaced.
Second grade would be.
I probably should have prefaced this. We have not, as an entire administrative staff, had the ability to sit down and even have this discussion. We are having this discussion with you raw.
Right.
We have not even had this discussion because we've been trying to get these numbers to you, because typically budgets are not even brought out until November. And so,
Again,
I'm just going on my history of working with boards.
My suggestion is
So
get us a copy of this.
I understand that.
And then give you a chance to talk.
I'm just saying that typically when I'm bringing my first budget as an administrator to a board, it's sometime in November, closer to Thanksgiving. That's the first time this board has ever seen my budget, and I've worked in many districts in different states. So we just haven't even had the time to sit down, but you asked for this information, so we're trying to provide it to you. So
And we appreciate it
we're
very
not
much.
ready to really defend this in any way.
Okay,
So,
and that's fine. It's just,
So.
and I was
And
only
we have,
throwing it out as,
you will
as
consider options and look at all different
as for you to
arrangements
think
and-
about
Right.
whether you need that, because when
Sure.
you justify what you need, then then you've got a heads up of, maybe I need to justify this if I want to keep this, kind of thing. And which is great, because if you really need it, the board here is, our first goal is our students. We are responsible to them in providing that education for them and making sure that you have what you need. It may not be luxury, but it should be what you need to be able to run your schools adequately and get the most for your students. And so, we can only sit here and look at, an overview, but you guys are there. You are in there doing the work.
We've had a lot more conversations today, just getting into the budget and the thick of it, everything too, so.
Yeah.
But we also
Absolutely.
represent the taxpayers.
Sure,
too.
you
So
do.
we're looking
We
for-
have to be
we're looking for
financially
the
responsible
best
to them.
responsibility.
Yeah, well, we're
So I
still
think-
being
I
fiscally
think if it's
responsible.
premature, then let's get us the information.
Okay.
I was looking at
Okay.
this package here, and it's mostly, it looks like mostly middle school. I don't know if this first
No,
batch.
it's all of them.
Mhm.
It's all of them.
Is this the
Rolls through, yeah.
Saxon
It's
River?
broken
We may have to sit, after this meeting, we can go through with you and kind of outline where they are in there.
I broke it down
Because
by
it's,
schools.
because the fees, the last four, it looks to me like it's 2019, 20, 21, and 22.
Mhm.
But you're saying in
That's
each
the middle
package
school.
is middle school,
Right.
central,
Central,
and
yeah.
Saxon's River.
Yeah.
And then this front group is what, a consolidated? This front?
Was the
He doesn't know exactly what they have.
Because it would be nice, like on Saxon's River, or to see Saxon River,
Mhm.
but the middle school to see even MS.
So which year are you looking at?
So any,
The first
Look
packet,
at the first packet.
the first
packet.
packet,
That way.
is that the one
That
that,
is 22.
Mhm.
Wait, wait.
Total central.
so is the first one say detailed expenditure comparison report?
yeah,
Okay, so that's this one. What is,
Mhm.
this is for everybody?
Yeah, see here, that's MS, which is the middle school.
Okay. So MS, so it starts middle school, and then it says CES.
so is this the budget? No, I don't need
This is
your
what he
help.
just said.
Okay. So is this top one
Yes,
23?
It starts on page 9.
Yep.
Sorry?
Is this fiscal 23, this top one?
22, which is the
22.
one that's currently going on. 23, that is not input in the system at all, because 23 is what we are discussing
So
now.
the top packet is the expenditure report. This is the budget and what's been expended on the budget right now.
For the current
The
financial.
current year,
fiscal year.
yes.
Okay,
And then each one of these
Those are the past years.
are the past
the
year.
past years, okay.
Okay, and then how it looks is if you look at like the first line item, it's got the account number, and then it says MS,
Yeah, okay,
so that's middle school, and then later on, it will say CES or SRES.
yeah, no, I got that,
Yeah,
okay,
okay.
thank you. Thank you, I just, the,
No, this is broken, that you sent me, this is how you sent it to me.
So this one's
This one's,
19.
yeah, no, I know, but this one's more granular,
Okay.
looking at it. So,
Because this one, he wanted a comparison of years.
Yep.
For the past year and current year.
Right.
That's why this one is different. And the top one compares the
it compares to last year.
Yep. Okay, so again, those are the current teachers and just expending it out based on those numbers. So, but we'll do some more analysis and we'll get this information to you.
And of course, right now, we have the title positions.
So that is all listed in there.
Yeah, and then of course, now we've got the ESSER funded position.
Those are listed in there, either under ESSER and Title I are all combined. So that just indicates that they are grant-funded positions.
And so you lump them, you haven't taken Title I and Title II and ESSER. See, I'm sorry, my eyesight isn't very great.
So they are combined because a lot of times, so like the interventionist is a local budget item. So the one interventionist that you see there is a local budget item.
It's not a title.
It's
or
not a
ESSER.
title.
No.
And so there are two people there are two full-time FTEs that are paid through for ESSER or Title I, because to break it down is the two title people might be the part-time person or the full-time person.
Right.
They're paid out of grant, so, the title money could go away just as easy as the ESSER money. I mean, probably won't, but it's there. I mean, we can granulate that down further to say, is this person an ESSER tag or a title tag, if that's what you'd like. I mean,
But all interventionalists are grant-funded positions.
No, those are
No.
local.
that's why I separated out interventionist from ESSER Title I.
So in addition to ESSER and Title I, or Title II, whatever,
A principal may have made a choice that they needed to have an additional body in their building to do interventions or to help out as they needed that was not grant funded.
So we put in there just to add on to it, so there's a locally funded substitute / interventionist, so it's a teacher, it could have been an entry teacher or a seasoned teacher, depending on who applied for it and things. It wasn't entry because we wanted to do some intervention work, but somebody who has been on staff ideally, who could substitute for anybody that's there. The problem is right now, on paper we have them, but they're in reality doing the sub work for the people that we don't have. So they're not even getting into the intervention roles right now because they're in the substitute role. What the plan would be is so that they would take any other small groups that we don't have coverage for, maybe that they're not Title I students yet, but somebody's struggling through the recovery plan, And so we have those locally funded because when we were putting it as a substitute, which we found last year for third grade, we could not find a substitute. So we left it locally funded because people were like, I don't want to work for $100 a day and work all year, but have no benefits and things like that. So we left it locally funded. So we have almost all in the SU are staffed. I believe Graftonville is not staffed, but in Rockingham, it is their staff. And so the person is subbing, and then when they're not subbing, they're doing small group interventions. But unfortunately for right now, at least for me, and I suspect for both of you, they are subbing because we don't have subs. So,
Just
but
to clarify though, that is SR funded, not position,
okay.
For you.
for all of us.
I think they're ESSER funded.
The building
The
sub
plan was
slash
ESSER funded, but-
They're ESSER funded.
I guess we'll have to go because I was told that they are not, that they are allowed a local budget.
No.
No, I don't, I mean, well, I don't know, but I mean, they never were, so.
I know they were, this was new this year.
Yeah.
But
they're
the
ESSER
plan
funded.
was
So they're
also
ESSER.
to remain, I believe, on staff eventually, but as far as I knew that they were ESSER initially.
I know there's a lot.
No, I'm just saying that's new information to me, so we may have to.
That's how the position was created.
I'm not
Yeah.
arguing
No, I know,
that it
it's
isn't, I'm just,
coding
I was going purely on what I see in the grant as far
Right.
as how many positions are funded,
Okay.
and that number would not include those interventionists.
Okay.
So that's a big one for us to kind of figure out.
Yeah. They need to figure that out.
All right, let's jump into the other part then. Vicky, if we can get off of this screen, sorry.
You want to go back to your,
The slideshow, yeah. All right. So we're going to kind of break it down by, we're going to go by building real quick. So this is central. I'm going to start with central. Again, we talked about the number of students. Again, those numbers may vary a little bit because like Carrie has pre-K in her building. And so she's counting those kids as they go, because
They're counted separately?
They are counted.
They are counted separately.
Are
They're
they,
not-
are they in that number?
So at the top it says with pre-K, and then the second number is.
Okay,
we
the
don't
160,
have
the
to look at that, right?
162 is with,
With them.
Because it's a different funding stream.
oh yeah, right.
It's not out of her local budget, so. So this is a little granular, but this is just breaking down the teachers again. And so, there's, she's got the 10 classroom teachers. The EL teacher I meant to ask you, is that ELL? Is that?
Yes,
Okay, so
English language.
that's,
It's probably 0.2.5 or so.
okay,
We do have more students in our school, so she's split among the whole SU.
right, okay,
So this is the staffing for
central.
Central.
central. Okay, so you have 10 actual classroom. and
Correct.
those are Rockingham
2 each grade
funded.
from K to 5.
The .3 EL, is that WNESU?
Yeah.
Yes, technically.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then you have one art, one music.
And it breaks down to, it's not a full one,
Mhm.
it's.
Right, we share, so it's shared, so technically it could be we were 0.6 it was supposed to be,
For art.
art and for music. Mhm.
What's the mental health?
And the 4
clinician?
special ed are at WNESU.
So the mental health clinician is an HCRS clinician that's hired through student services.
Okay.
So that's not a cost, a local cost,
Mhm.
and nor are obviously the special educators, except for the assessment back to the different districts. But
Is our guidance teacher a clinician as well, or is that?
So she does small groups, it's, so it's a school adjustment counselor, typically they may be called, it falls under the guidance category, but we'll do small groups with students, individual counseling on the small term needs, something happened, locally, but it becomes, if it needs to be therapy that needs to go into, that goes to the mental health clinician referral, and so the counselor will do some just small days, a few weeks at a time, something like that. They're doing like grief counseling, they're doing school adjustment in terms of new students, things like that, yeah.
All right.
so some of the capital improvements that need to happen at Central, there's a new roof that needs to be installed, which is again, those dollars would probably tell you to double them at this point. But you know, the original quote was for $226,000, and that covers what, the gym roof and an older section.
Yes.
What if we were to look at using ESSER funds to pay for that? We have to look at, again, through a COVID lens, and so we just have to always keep that in perspective. The key card fob system for the doors, we are actually looking to push that out as an SU-wide piece, because it's far better to have one system as opposed to 6 different systems. And so we're looking at how we can do that. We do believe that could be an ESSER-related fund. Again, I talked earlier about the mini splits in the HVAC system, so that's something we need to look at the bigger piece. And it may be mini splits are the best thing for Central, as opposed to a whole HVAC system coming in. So we just want to make sure we've looked at that. And then door and window replacements, $76,000. There it says all doors need to be replaced, you know, but the windows that don't currently open. And again, when I've talked with the state, we can't really say like, oh, hey, we need to replace all our doors, let's use ESSER funds, because that's not an appropriate use of the funds. If we had a door that we were moving because we were developing a quarantine room, that would be an appropriate use of ESSER funds. So, but the windows that don't open, if we need to get them open. So
That could be ESSER.
Yeah, that's
Right.
ESSER funds.
And this is projected to be a multi-year approach that we're trying to look at.
Now, these mini splits, these are heat pumps, and I'm assuming they're heat pumps.
Yes,
And are they AC only?
heat and AC. They can do both depending on the weather and sort of thing. So, but this is based
Why
on
would you do
Westminster.
that? Why would you have in there?
So at different times, in the wintertime, you're gonna want heat, in the summertime, you put the air conditioning.
So
You can do
they
both.
would replace the central boiler?
It's supplemental. Again, I would prefer to defer to the experts on the specifics parts of it, but there are some rooms because of COVID that has to be maintained at a certain temperature. And our boiler is struggling to be able to reach the temperature, you know, say it's 68 to 72 in certain parts of the building. And so that's what Mr. Terry was talking about when he was there too, is checking in the boiler's capacity, making sure that it can work and it's structured to be the way exactly it's inspected first of all, and then it's up running and making sure that it can function the way it needs to be to heat to capacity. In some of the rooms, like the O2 room and things, you have to prop the door open in order to get the heat in there. And so whether it's flushing that needs to be done, we're still defaulting to getting an assessment and to see exactly what needs to happen and make sure it's working properly.
Whether your ones on the playground side are too hot.
Which they are.
I would say one of the.
It's only worse than, yeah,
I worked in
Murphy Hicks room, it's very warm in the summertime
Yeah.
and the warmer days and things too, so.
Whereas your other side is too cool.
Right, yes, if only we could channel it, we would be all set, so. This is not a professional estimate. I am full disclosure for that, so talking to Westminster, talking about what their part of it, so we would prefer to have that part. There are some things, like Efficiency Vermont does have some discounted programs, whether we're eligible or not. Mr. DeBell or somebody would reach out, obviously, and try and get a better number for us, that's.
But I think the bigger piece is, these are the needs. There is a
Right.
need to deal with heating, ventilation, air conditioning in the building. This is one approach. Where do you come in and replace everything, and what's that approach going to cost? And that's a number we don't have. So.
No.
Tuition, 37 preschool students. That would be for the SU wide. So we'd have to break that down a little bit more because we have a classroom at Westminster also. So
And Jennifer Keenan's ready to,
Yeah.
those parts.
and so. We anticipate, those numbers will go up a little bit. We're doing active engagement to try and get kids in, so.
Why do you call that tuition? This is the preschool,
So with
right?
universal preschool, and so I know Jennifer was on here, she said she could speak to it more specifically. There you are. You want to speak to this tuition component, and so why it's called tuition?
because it's tuition. Vermont has universal pre-K, and we're expecting around 37 Rockingham preschool students next year, which is, I think 37 is the number we have this year. And we pay $35.36 this year per child for their preschool tuition at private programs that qualify through the state as public pre-K delivered in private settings. And it's,
I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about the preschool at Central.
No.
But this is for the
Right.
kids that aren't in, these are the outfits or whatever. Yeah.
Correct. No, I can understand.
but
Okay.
it comes out of the local budget, so that's why we're talking about it. But that 37 is the Rockingham number.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
These are students that go somewhere else.
Jennifer, if you,
Yes.
You have some
Yeah.
at
the question is, these are
Students,
students who go
Mhm.
other than our two classrooms, correct?
Correct. They are in private programs around the state that qualify per the state as high quality preschool programs. They register with Wyndham Northeast, so I have all their registration materials, and their programs bill me quarterly for the 10 hours per week for 35 weeks. And the cost this year is $35.36 per student. I've sent all the principals what their projected costs will be this year. And I check their attendance and do all that follow-up stuff. And then those kids appear in our kindergartens or not, or they go to private school afterwards. And the tuition each year goes up between 80 and 100. I don't know what next year's tuition is. The prior slide had an estimate. I told Carrie and Laura it was between 80 and 100 per year up. So that's, someone bumped it up. $80 it looks like. Did that answer your question?
Thank you, yes.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, so as far as the central office budget or the central office, pardon me, the CES budget, where she is right now is projecting for salaries a slight increase, and that has to do with the 1.5%. We don't know where negotiations are going to turn out, so that number could, 1.4 could go up, but right now we're kind of holding where we are. Benefits we know are going to go up. And then as far as miscellaneous, where Ms. Kennedy is currently projecting is about a $70,000 increase. Some of that has to do with, we found some copier usage that hadn't been budgeted in this year's budget that went up, and then I think there's a couple others, I don't know.
So I can, sure, speak to that, and Ricky can attest to more details and things, but things like that, we're hoping IXL and MAP assessments that we're doing electronically could potentially be paid for out of grant, but we can't rely on it only being out of the grant. So we have to kind of budget for it and then hope that title money or ESSER money or somebody will pay for that. And so we had to put those in there, and they were not coded before. And so you want to add any details on those?
No, just to highlight that this was the raw budget before the actual group discussion. So.
And some of it, assessments for staffing, make sure that we're paying a, 1/6 or 1% of personnel for like technology. I don't believe that Central was being billed for that before, and I don't know if others were. We're still trying to discuss who's had them in line items and things too. So we are absolutely mindful that this looks projectedly high, but at the same time, we are cautious because we do need to make sure. So what was cut last year with that 1.5%, unfortunately, are things that on the specific line item, it sounds great that they were cut, but then we have still like the fire alarm inspection has to still get paid and has to do that. So the fire extinguisher still has to be inspected. The exterminator, the different, let me see, the black back flow valve. So Rick Schumann has put together a list of things. So even though that line item was cut, unfortunately, these bills are still coming in for services that we have contracts for. So we still need to fund that for next year. And so we're trying to figure out where we're pulling it from this year because we understand the budget cuts, but at the same time, these can't be cut because they're contracted services with different people. So we're working as a whole group to try and figure out what line item would be correctly coded for it, to make sure that some of the places, and as Flores mentioned before, as we shifted from the e-finance, the coding that they have and in the business office and on our school local budgets to make sure that it's correctly coded in the right place, and that we are planning for that. So we make sure we have a copier line item and that it's designated as a copier line item, and then we know how to populate it appropriately. And then obviously we're still looking, we will make sure, we did get a significant bill, and we hadn't anticipated that for our copiers. So we will make sure staff are using it appropriately, but then at the same time, we may look to order some map workbooks that go with it. So instead of some, copying that may go along with it to print out, it may be cheaper to just buy the workbooks instead of just a few sheets and things here and there, because those add up. So
or the use of an online program,
right?
Because kids have Chromebooks and they can do the work right there in a Chromebook. I think some of this is, I think some of this also comes into the play of that I've experienced since being here. A lot of times the focus was on the bottom line as opposed to the individual lines. And so if the bottom line came out in the plus, that's all that really mattered. And I think it's really important, and working with principals, that we get accurate lines. So if a line is going to be spending a certain amount of money, we're not overinflating that line, but at the same time, we're not underinflating that line and then just finding the money somewhere else to transfer it later. So that we're accurately budgeting. I mean, if copies are going to cost $9,000, then we need to accurately budget, and then we need to say, okay, if we're going to reduce that, something has to give, right? So how are we going to mitigate that piece? And so I think it's really important to look at it. There is, I know in Carrie's, there's just a cost of some things are going on. What you used to pay for something, it just goes up, and contracted services go up. So
something like the crossing guard was added in because we're not exactly sure under whose line item that was, and obviously it affects Central and the middle school, but Saxons River doesn't have. We have our own on-site crossing guards, but this is the one specifically on Atkinson and School Street that affects the town per se, as opposed to just individual central schools and things. So those are things that we've had to figure out, and trying to, exactly what Andy's saying, is put them in the right line items where they should be, and then discussing from whose line item they're coming, so we can budget for them appropriately.
So I really think that this is premature. I think we need to have the staff work with the superintendent. When I see the numbers, I want to see the dynamic that goes on between what the buildings wish to have, what the superintendent thinks is appropriate, and then what the board get at it. And I mean, I appreciate all the detail, but I think really and truly, we look at the major drivers of cost, and those are the keys, and typically, and I think it's too bad to just keep rambling on when this is all, we don't even have a budget for that because you haven't really been able to pull it together.
So I think one thing is the principals have been working on the premise of trying to have a balanced, if not a look at any kind of cuts. Right? I mean, so there are some things that we found that as we started working on, even today we're finding them. So these numbers are like, they're adjusting as they go, because like the copier was just today that we found out about. So there are some things, but we wanted to give you guys something and be prepared. I think, if we continue on real quick, and we can go through them real quick, I know that Laura's is pretty much like almost flat. And so we can kind of go through them real quick. We kind of covered a lot of this stuff, so we can, there's staffing. And then the other thing is I'll upload this into that shared folder, so you can take this and take your time and dissect it a lot more.
And I think that's important, because I know you guys were supposed to be meeting in September to be starting your preliminary stuff, so giving us some of this preliminary stuff is actually letting us get started with thinking as to what you're doing, and every time you find something new, that's good, because then you're adding it in. You've got time this year to add it in, whereas last year we were starting so late that we didn't have the time to add it in. That's one reason why the boards were saying we wanted to start in October. And so that we could get started.
So Laura's been, she has some capital improvements, just real quick, some building management system upgrades, camera system. Again, I think that's something we want to make sure that IT is involved in, so that the support is there. So that's a big thing. The mini splits, again, without going into that, a walk-in refrigerator. That's something also I think is important. And again, some of these are ESSER funds and some of them aren't. Retiling several classrooms. I think that'll be important. I don't know when the last time that was done, because then there's asbestos that has to kind of be played into that, but I'm hoping that wouldn't be an issue.
Shouldn't be. I mean, this building was totally redone.
Right, I just don't, that's the history of it. I don't have a history of, like, the older part of the building was that floor done, so that's.
Oh, yeah, the whole thing was done later.
Right, and so then a generator for the building, and I think, again, that's something we could look at pricing out through ESSER, because if the generator's not working, we can't provide education, right? And so that's in the conversations I've had with the state, that would probably be a very good use of funds, so. Again, where she is.
I would just mention one thing, the mini splits. If you're talking about replacing boilers, the boilers aren't working properly, etc. And then you're talking on top of that, you're talking about heat pumps that provide both heat and cooling. Again, you have to think through this thing in terms of a cost benefit or just a cost standpoint. If our building systems aren't working properly, well, why hasn't the board heard about those things? This was a huge issue at the middle school before the renovations. I have no idea. I mean, I haven't been on the board for a long time, but that issue was supposedly addressed. Now, granted, if it's 95 degrees out and you're on the top floor, then it's going to be hotter than it is on the bottom floor. But I mean, those are environmental short-term factors.
It's over 100 degrees.
Yeah, it's way too hot.
We're not talking. It's not conducive for learning. Right, that's the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking because we want it to be a nice 75-degree comfort. We're talking about what is a conducive temperature for learning, and then add COVID in, where you have to have certain ranges.
I agree. If we have COVID funds for HVAC systems, to me, that's a wonderful way to do it, to improve the learning environment.
Again, I can't speak to where mini splits came in as part of the conversation.
Well, everybody's doing it.
But with 6 weeks in, I just know that the conversation was around mini splits, so I'm continuing on with that. But that's why I want to have a total needs assessment done, so that I can
absolutely
look to it. Because I can't speak to that with any authority. So I don't know if mini splits were just seen as a fix-all, quick.
I'm sure it was.
Right.
And again, I don't believe that we should do things.
I mean, you can't do it at the middle school.
Right. So we feel a whole comprehensive needs assessment is really important.
So again, where the things that are going to stay the same, salaries and benefits, those known increases, but where Laura is working, she's looking at a modest increase right there across her budget. Again, capital improvements, we're waiting on some numbers, so that's why there's nothing there for that. And then into the middle school, again, our teachers broken out. these are some of the capital improvements that are needed. There's roofing issues that need to be addressed. There's masonry work that needs to be addressed. Parking lot. That's gonna be on the 5th floor, right? So
Yeah.
we're gonna build a parking lot on the 5th floor.
We're gonna put one of those spirals on there.
But you're talking about the area in the back here
Yes.
where it is in pretty bad shape. I think I took a spill there a couple of years ago. And then some building management system update, and that's looking at some stuff here with, can you speak to that Java-based, the HTML?
Yeah, Java is like a depreciated programming language. It's very antiquated. It's very good to see that on there.
And so that would be with what, the entry system? Is that, or what's?
No, so I think that's your heating, ventilation control.
Got it, okay.
Right, correct?
Right.
And then some lawn sprinklers, type of stuff. So, so again, what I'm asked Mr. DeBell to do as we're working through each one of these is that we develop a 5-year plan for all of this, because there isn't a 5-year plan for how we would even address these things, and it should be out there and easily seen by the public. So, and then next slide, please. So where we are actually is the middle school budget, just getting down to miscellaneous, because again, salaries and benefits right now is something we don't have control over. When we looked at taking out the capital improvement needs, because those would be things we'd be talking about as possible ESSER funds, some of them is actually a decrease in the miscellaneous costs at the middle school. Of a small amount. What is that? $6,000, so give or take. So again, I think where people are trying to come in is come in at that flat budget, if not under a little bit, and to try and be conservative. Again, Carrie's budget had some found expenses. I think there's also, she has a couple students who need very specific behavior support that are not special education students. So that's a cost the building has to take on that wasn't anticipated. So that's where you see some of those, that little bit of a 7,000. There is a $30,000 in there for a behavior interventionist that we would contract through HCRS for. And so that's a very specific need.
That's what was the budget that was the most cut last year.
Right.
We cut more than it was actually supposed to, because that's what it was requested from the board. But I know Carrie and I, we worked together and we did struggle as where we were gonna cut. And so I guess this year is about maybe just seeing her actual budget, how it should have been, because right now, with all the needs that the kiddos have with the extra help, like printouts and all those things, she is seeing it in her budget.
So
I guess Megan and Jason, do you have some questions?
I do not at this point.
We just kind of need to digest it probably.
yeah, it's a lot of.
It is a lot.
We gotta get
Got quite a bit going on, so yeah.
Lot to look at. I know that's where I'm feeling. We do really appreciate everything that you guys have done. Really helpful.
And the challenges, yes.
All of that stuff. Appreciate that.
When will we see a WNESU budget?
So we're meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, we're meeting tomorrow to kind of go
Then,
We're working on that.
yeah.
Yes, so tomorrow I have a meeting with Andy, and then next Wednesday we do have a meeting with the SR2 board, and then we'll go from there. However, they want to fit it in an agenda, if we will have a special meeting for it. But the idea is that Andy and I could just sit down tomorrow and finalize the SU, so that way we can have something to present to the board.
And again, the whole goal is to be flat, if not under, across the board. And so, you know, if the local boards can be flat or down, and then the SU board can be flat or down, you know, we're doing a double savings to the taxpayers. So that's what we're really trying to kind of push. And look how we're being fiscally responsible. I mean, it's, and you know, coming in and just trying to figure out where everything was and how things were, you know, were spent and put. We want to make sure it's right and transparent. So.
Good. And one of the things I did mention, I don't think I copied you, was taking a kind of a new look at the allocation of the SU expenses among the local towns.
Yes, you did. I've seen that mentioned, and yes, and we talked about it. You know, you and I had talked about it with Andy at one point too, I think. So
I don't think I talked to Andy about it. No, I know.
so yeah, we can talk about
But,
that.
yeah, but that's
for their budget.
that's the SU.
Yeah. Okay. So if we're all set with that, I'm going to move on to appointments and resignations. I don't think we have any. Would love to be looking at another reading or a science teacher, but anyway, I'm sure Andy will keep looking.
Or 7.
Yeah, on some paras and your health people that you've already talked about.
Yeah.
Okay. Under number 9, we have the retirement incentive approval. We had one teacher which just asked that the name not be put out there. But we had one teacher that sent us a letter that she will be resigning this year and let us know about the before October 1st, and it is requesting the incentive retirement stipend. So if I could have a motion to accept her letter and approve that retirement incentive.
This was something that was sent out.
Yeah, the letter.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept the letter from the teacher asking for the retirement incentive. Is there any discussion at all, or are you all set, guys?
All set.
No discussion. Megan, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Jason?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
And so that has been approved. Okay. B is the Parks Place parking lot fee. We have a check from the Parks Place for their fee, and we need to accept that fee.
I'll
Could I
move
have a
that we
motion
accept-
to that?
We accept the rental fee from Parks Place.
Okay, Megan?
Should I abstain from this since I signed that check?
Okay.
Conflict of interest there.
Yeah, I think I'll abstain from this one, guys.
Okay, Jason?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
James?
yes.
And I vote yes, so that's been accepted.
Better enjoy that dollar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
gonna help.
Okay. We'll do the memorandum of understanding in exec session. So next up is director's comments. Megan, would you like to start?
Oh, come on. I'm not really prepared from tonight. I just wanted to thank Mr. McAuliffe for great questions. I appreciate him coming on. I know I said it last time, but I really appreciate it during budget season. Mr. Haas, I appreciate it feels like there's kind of been a change in communication styles when it comes to reporting to parents. And as a parent, getting emails from you with updates has really just kind of taken some of the stress and second guessing on how we're getting notifications. It's been amazing. So I really appreciate all the feedback that you took, I guess, from nurses and everybody and the help. So thank you for that as a parent and as a board member. It really streamlined having kids in all the schools and all the notifications. It's been amazing. So thank you for all the hard work of you and everybody there tonight. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Megan. Jason?
Yeah, we're coming into our wonderful season we know as winter here. And I'll be mounting Darth Blader on the front of one of my plow trucks at work, I'm pretty sure, very soon. And probably an Orange Crush as well. You never know. But here we go for winter. Everybody get ready. It's going to be long and hopefully not brutal. Thank you.
James?
It's nice to see the principals, and this is the first time I've seen Flora, right? And so keep up the good work.
Okay, and to me, thank you to all of our wonderful administration and everybody working in the business office that is showing such support and just really out there ready to answer our questions. And the increased communication is absolutely wonderful that we're getting from everybody, totally, in every single department. So I appreciate that. I would say just stay safe and be kind to each other at all times. That's sometimes hard to do, so I know you guys teach it in your schools, and if we can get those little ones just showing that and even taking it home to their families and the community out there so that everybody's able to use that. It's a big feat. Appreciate all your work. Okay, the next meeting will be November 1st at 5:30. We'll do some more work on budgets and stuff. Please get anything that you want for the agenda to me before then, board members, so that I can work on the agenda. I would entertain a motion to go into executive session with the terminology that we usually use that provides for confidentiality and not sharing.
Do you have a copy of that?
I was looking for it.
We should keep it on the table.
I had it right here. I just moved it when I sat down. I can do it from this other one. No minutes.
You okay if we dismiss the principals?
And
Oh, yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
the principals can absolutely, we appreciate all of you. Andy, I'll lock the door, when you go out, just make sure it's through.
Yeah, I will do that.
Okay.
Do you need to work with this discussion?
No, I think we're fine.
Okay, all right.
The motion would be to enter into executive session to discuss negotiations and a memorandum of agreement. Premature public knowledge can place the individuals at a disadvantage.
We'll chat another time.
Can I have that motion, please?
So moved, Priscilla.
Thank you, Megan. Let's vote, Megan.
I vote yes.
Jason?
Yes.
And,
Yes.
okay, so, and we invited Mr. Haas.
Are you gonna have a response afterwards?